criticism and how it relates to your paper that you're going to write. And all that literary criticism is, as the picture here suggests, is a different lens through looking at literature. Every day I wear my Mrs. Firth lenses, and I look at you through my Mrs. Firth glasses, and in my way I look at you and how bright and fresh-faced you all are, and how much potential you have, and I look forward to getting to see you every day for the most part. There are a few exceptions. And I look forward to getting you to think about things that maybe you haven't thought about before. That's fun for me. I like my job, fun. But sometimes I could take off these lenses and I might look at you through my Kanye glasses. And when I look at you as Kanye, you look awfully poor.
What?
Yeah, I mean, none of those clothes are designer. I have not seen your hands at the concert. White girls. I feel like I'm wasting my time
He's
here.
married to a white girl.
No, she's like Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
Armenian.
She's a white girl at heart.
It's not white.
So,
She got robbed.
thank you. Yes, it's true.
It's designer though. So.
And as Kanye, I'm glad you noticed. But, I don't really like looking at the world as Kanye. He's a bit of an arrogant pig. So I might want to look at the world through my Elton John glasses instead. In which case, you all look awfully blurry and terribly young and somewhat boring.
Why blurry?
Because I'm old, I'm Elton John. And
I thought it was a joke.
and possibly also drug-addled, I don't know.
I'm boring anymore.
Anyway, I much prefer to look at you through my Mrs. Firth lenses, but when forced to look at you as different people, I might see different things about you. And that's what you're going to do as a literary critic. You're going to put on different lenses to try to explain why stories are the way that they are, why literature is the way that it is. And today we're going to practice doing that through Goldilocks. Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yeah, it's not bad.
You're familiar with that story?
Yeah, we is.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to look at these many kinds of lenses through this story that we all know, right? You remember that from your childhood? Here's the thing. If you look at Goldilocks and the Three Bears from an adult point of
It's
view,
weird.
it's a really weird story.
Because I love doing that.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you a video meant for kids to help them learn how to read, right? A very basic telling of Goldilocks so that we can all be on the same page and
Little hobo.
get the same story. So here we go. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's happening.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl. Her name was Goldilocks. She had golden hair. One day, Goldilocks was walking in the forest. She saw a house and knocked on the door. She went inside. Nobody was there. Goldilocks saw 3 bowls on the table. She was hungry.
This porridge is too hot. This porridge is too cold. This porridge is just right.
Goldilocks ate all the porridge. Goldilocks was tired now.
This chair is too big. This chair is too big too. This chair is just right.
But the chair broke. Goldilocks was very tired. She went upstairs.
This bed is too hard. This bed is too soft. This bed is just right.
Soon the bears came home.
Someone's been eating my porridge.
Said Daddy Bear.
Someone's been eating my porridge.
Said Mummy Bear.
Someone's been eating my porridge. And it's all gone.
Said Baby Bear.
Someone's been sitting on my chair.
Said Daddy Bear.
Someone's been sitting on my chair.
Said Mummy Bear.
Someone's been sitting on my chair. and it's broken, said Baby Bear.
Someone's been sleeping in my bed.
said Daddy Bear. Someone's been sleeping in my bed, said Mummy Bear.
Someone's been sleeping in my bed, and she's still there,
said Baby Bear. Goldilocks woke up and saw the three bears. Help! She ran downstairs and into the forest. She never came back again.
Okay, so looking at this story as an adult instead of a kid, obviously there are some holes in this story. Remember how I used that term? There are holes here that are kind of difficult to explain.
Like, why are the bears
Did they
in
get
the
in
house
it?
and the human is in the woods?
This is
What's
a
up
good
with
question. What are some other obvious questions we might have about this story?
Why did she
Why did
just
she
walk
bring
in?
an enter?
How can you tell when someone
She's
sits
a
in your
felon.
chair?
What?
How can I?
Because there was a question.
Well, he said
Press
how
the
Why
stop
did you
it.
repeat
in the video.
What the heck? You can't.
Who's raising this child?
Right, where did she come from?
Where
Right.
did she go?
She's kinda crossed
Where did she
now.
come from Cat Najo?
What if she was a brunette? The name wouldn't even work.
Would it?
Porridge would have all been made at
Brunetti
the same
walks.
time and served together. How could they have different
What if she was
temperatures?
bald?
Why can the bears talk? Why do the bears have a house and why are bears eating porridge
Why
and
did why
sleeping in
separate
bed?
bed?
Baby Bear has everything.
Why are
just
the
right.
parents
Why
in
did they
separate
leave
beds?
before the house?
Maybe
And who
they're-
likes cold porridge?
Maybe they're going through a rough time and they just don't want to sleep in the same bed, but they still want to be close together to keep a relationship.
I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Our natural inclination is to try to fill the holes in the story. It's easy to come up with holes in this story. But as literary critics, we need to choose a lens to look through as we look at the story to try to explain why those holes are there. Now, my first example of lens for this is deconstructionism. If you look at your green sheets, the Schools of Literary Theory, now this is not your copy, this is my copy. Where do you suppose you can get a copy? That's correct, on my website. All right, now this is from the Bedford Glossary of Critical and Literary Terms by Ross Murfin and Supriya M. Ray. And we're just going to look at the first paragraph here, and maybe a little more. But deconstruction involves the close reading of text in order to demonstrate that any given text has irreconcilably contradictory meanings, rather than being a unified logical whole. As J. Hillis Miller, the preeminent American deconstructor, has explained in an essay entitled Stevens, Rock and Criticism as Cure from 1976, deconstruction is not a dismantling of the structure of a text, but a demonstration that it has already dismantled itself. Its apparently solid ground is no rock but thin air. Now, to help that make more sense, look at the next paragraph. Deconstruction was both created and has been profoundly influenced by the French philosopher on language, Jacques Derrida, if you're saying it the French way. Derrida, who coined the term deconstruction, argues that in Western culture, people tend to think and express their thoughts in terms of binary oppositions. Something is white but not black, masculine and therefore not feminine, a cause rather than effect. Other common and mutually exclusive pairs include beginning and end, conscious and unconscious, presence and absence, and speech and writing. Derrida suggests these oppositions are hierarchies in miniature, containing one term that Western culture views as positive or superior, and another considered negative or inferior, even if only slightly so. Through deconstruction, Derrida aims to erase the boundary between binary oppositions and to do so in such a way that the hierarchy implied by the oppositions is thrown into question. Okay. This is true. In the Western culture, we do put things into binary opposition, and we make value judgments about one being better than the other. Daytime is safe. Night is dangerous. Daytime is light. Night is dark. But if you think about it, you can think of plenty of examples when that's not true. When is it not safe in the daytime? Pardon? Well, I mean, all the time, really. But for example, school shootings. None of them have happened at nighttime. They're all in the day. You're safe as houses if you're in a school in the dark. pretty much. Nobody else is
That's
there.
why we turn off the lights during a school shooting. Like,
Is
I
it?
mean, not during a school shooting, but like on lockdowns, we turn the lights off.
That's true. That's
Like,
true.
we hide.
And but we tend to think of, oh, nighttime it's dangerous, but plenty of very dangerous things happen in the day. And the daytime it's light, but there are times when it's not light in the daytime, such as during an eclipse, or
Underground.
if you're underground in a room with no windows. If you go to the movie theater, it's dark during the daytime. And then at night, when is it light?
When there's lights.
And there
When-
are lights on.
When you turn lights on, when you go to a concert, when there's lightning. There are plenty of examples of ways that the binary opposition just doesn't work. But we tend to want to do that, at least in Western culture. Force things into being an either-or opposition. Now, when I looked at Goldilocks and the Three Bears, I thought about what we're supposed to think. And at the end, we're supposed to feel like, oh, this poor little blonde girl. You know, she yells help and runs off. And, oh, what happened to the poor little blonde girl? And, oh, these bears, are they going to eat her? But if you look at this critically, if I were going to write literary criticism from a deconstructionist point of view about Goldilocks, my thesis statement might be something like this. Goldilocks and the Three Bears inaccurately portrays the bear victims in the story as beasts, when in actuality, the human Goldilocks is the character who behaves without morality or a clear understanding of the rules of civilization. The bear's the victim here, not Goldilocks. Why are we supposed to care what happens to her?
I
Well,
thought
because
that
we
was
can relate
the
to
whole
her.
point of the story, that the bears were the victims.
We're not all blondes.
I know, but we're all humans. Like, we can, like, relate to her as in, like,
No, we can't. She broke in and entered. She ate other people's food.
as a child, you can relate to her because she's a kid.
I never
And she's a
broke
human.
Breaks into a house
I have
and
done
then
that once.
sleeps there.
Okay, on a child level, like, you were overthinking this, and that's the point
I
of
don't
this
just
whole
eat
thing.
food that I find on the, like, I don't know.
Well, as literary critics, we should be overthinking to a certain extent and that
Yeah.
analyzing deeply.
Yeah.
But we would not normally be deeply analyzing Goldilocks. You're right about that. We are doing this as an example. We're starting at a very basic level so you can build from here. But yes, you are right in that respect. But it's worth noting the original, or the origin of the Goldilocks story, it wasn't originally a little blonde girl. It was an old hag who'd done it. And there was no sympathy for the old hag. But as Robert Southey rewrote it, and, no, it wasn't Southey. I'm not sure, but later versions of Goldilocks in the 19th century, as it became more widespread, replaced the old hag with a young, blonde white girl with whom you're supposed to feel sympathy, and kids were supposed to root for her against these bears. But if I were going to write about this as a deconstructionist, I would say this is all wrong. This binary is wrong. This, blonde white girl we're supposed to feel sorry for is actually the perpetrator of a crime here. She's a breaker or an enterer. She's a burglar. These bears are the victims. The predators here are the victims. It's kind of like Zootopia. You've seen the movie Zootopia? You should have totally seen the movie
No, I saw
Zootopia.
it. It's also online.
It's Netflix. It's on Netflix.
Wait, I thought it was bad. I thought
I
I heard it was
watched
bad.
it 2 days ago. It's the best Disney
Zootopia? It's
movie
great.
that
I've
they've
seen it
ever done.
twice.
How is it? Wait, how is it great? I mean, I don't know what it's about.
It like
It's just like it
it,
talks
like,
about current situations
talks
as
about
animals,
like
and it's
like social status.
Spoiler alert at the end of the movie.
But it also suggests that, predators aren't dangerous just because they're predators. In a way, that movie is examining our binary oppositions that are damaging. And as a deconstructionist, you could do the same with Canterbury Tales. That's what I'm going to be asking you to do, is taking some aspect of Canterbury Tales and choose a literary lens to criticize it through. That's what you're going to be doing. So, but deconstructionism is only one of the many schools of thought that you can choose.
Can you
Yes.
criticize it as Kanye?
No, that's not actual literary criticism. That was just an example. Sorry. I'm sorry. But you can look at the Canterbury Tales through a feminist lens, which is in a way kind of like shooting fish in a barrel. And when we did the Wife of Bath's tale, maybe you noticed that I kind of pushed the conversation towards a feminist reading of that story. Remember that? Right? Michael, it made you uncomfortable? Anyway, so if I were going to look at Goldilocks and the Three Bears from a feminist point of view, my thesis statement, which by the way will be stated as if it is fact, but it is actually an opinion, and I'm going to be spending the rest of my paper making a one-sided argument for it, supporting it with text. This should be a familiar concept to you, yes? Okay. But if I were writing a feminist criticism, I might say, in Goldilocks and the Three Bears, the misogynist dysfunctionality of the medieval family unit is illustrated by the fact that female characters, Goldilocks and Mama Bear, must always settle for second best or the leftovers.
Is that a legitimate
'cause-
argument at all, or are you just kind of like pulling that out of like?
Well, I mean, I could make this argument. I'm not sure it would be a great one, but I'm not actually going to write this paper. Do what?
She had the soft bed.
That could be a
Who
bad
does?
thing.
Mama Bear? Soft beds are terrible. They
Yeah,
make
they're
your back
gross.
hurt.
Soft beds are awesome.
Okay, but when you got like a butt,
I'd like them
and then your
hard.
back doesn't lay on it, bite.
Yeah, you're young. You think a soft bed is great, but trust me, once you get a little older, you need a firm mattress to support your spine. But that would be something that I could prove.
And the
That would be something that I could research and say as one becomes the maternal age that Mama Bear would be, she would need a firm mattress. Here's data to show it. You know, that would be something that I could support my opinion with. Now, I'm not actually going to write an academic literary criticism of Goldilocks. You understand this, right? This is an example. I'm giving you examples of academic terminology, how to write a thesis statement that is acceptable in literary criticism. Yes?
Thank you.
Now, you could disagree with me that this is not the point the story is making. That is legitimate. But that also indicates that I've got a good thesis statement because it is an arguable statement that someone could disagree with, and I am going to prove my point throughout the rest of the paper. Okay? Feminism doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. It's probably the school of thought on this sheet with which you are the most acquainted. All right, moving on. So, if feminism does not appeal to you and you do not want to write through a feminist lens, you could choose psychoanalytical. Now, if you are taking AP Psych, it's finally going to come in handy. All right, so if you're going to write psychoanalytical literary criticism, this is going to be the paper that is the most scientific in its approach. It's going to require outside research using at least the DSM. Do you know what the DSM is? Yeah. This is the handbook that psychological professionals use to diagnose conditions and disorders. It stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, I want to say. And then it's updated from time to time, and it has a number after it. I think that the most recent DSM is 5, the DSM-5. Does that sound right to anyone? Who knows? Haley's nodding. Yes, okay. So if you were going to write a psychoanalytical paper, you would try to determine a condition or disorder that is present in the author, that is present in the narrator, or in one of the characters. In this case, I might try to make the argument that Goldilocks and the Three Bears is an allegory for a young woman suffering from a borderline personality disorder that drives her to disregard the social context of personal property. Okay, so first I would need to look at the DSM to get the breakdown of what characteristics define borderline personality disorder, right? Then I would need to go through step by step the story and show text evidence that supports each of those characteristics of borderline personality disorder. And if there is a characteristic that Goldilocks does not display, I will need to address that and explain why it doesn't matter and why I'm still right. Okay? And if I want to build a stronger case, if my point is that she disregards the social context of personal property because of her borderline personality disorder, then maybe I could do some more research, perhaps find some court cases or some journal articles by psychiatrists about people who have borderline personality disorder who have done the same things as Goldilocks, who have broken into people's houses and eaten their food and slept in their beds and felt justified in doing so. That will be the strongest support for my argument. So, we have looked at several characters in the Canterbury Tales who might have disorders or problems that you could diagnose. Can you think of an example? PTSD, who might have that? The Knight, right. And you could show evidence that that has been present through almost all military operations, that we have people discussing it, using different terms, even before the birth of psychiatry. You know, shell shock in World War I, there are even references in the Iliad to the soldiers having stress problems after a battle. So that will be something to address. And then also to break down the symptoms of PTSD and how can you see that in the narrator of The Knight's Tale or in the general prologue description, which is also fair game. Anything else? What about the wife of Bath? Remember when I talked about her narrative style and how we had a couple of stories within a story within a story?
That would rant on certain things.
Yes. What were you saying, Zane? ADD or ADHD is what they call it now, right? You could try to decide, does her tangential storytelling reflect a characteristic of ADHD? You could research ADHD, do a step-by-step systematic breakdown of those characteristics, try to support it with the text, and come to a conclusion. It sounds easy, but
you have to put a lot of work.
You have to put a lot of work into it. Your burden of proof is pretty high with psychoanalytical criticism. If you are not researching and using the DSM to support it, you are not going to do well on that paper. You can't just, well, my friend has ADHD, and he says this, and so, yeah, that won't work. You must have a detailed works cited page in which you show me that you have read journal articles and support and look to the DSM for support. Yes, Fahad.
Just like wanted to ask, are you picky on like MLA, so like putting it in MLA form and stuff like that?
Yes, this will need to be in MLA format.
Okay.
I'll do a quick review next week sometime about what MLA is and what I expect. I don't expect you to memorize MLA format. That's a waste of your time. But I expect you to go and check to see if you're doing it right for MLA. Okay. So, if you don't want to do psychoanalytical, there's still yet another option. You could choose Marxist criticism. Now, how many of you are really familiar with Marxism? Just Zane?
I don't.
Where did you get that familiarity, Zane?
My stepmom's a sociologist.
There you go. Yes, so that would be an excellent resource for you if you wanted to write about Marxism, for sure. I know that some of you took AP World History.
Yeah. That's what
Yes? Okay. Well, I don't really think that you need an in-depth understanding of Karl Marx's, entire body of work to write Marxist criticism. Really, Marxist literary criticism is economic literary criticism. Let's look at the Marxist entry on your green sheet. Okay, this is from the Bedford Glossary of Critical Literary Terms, again. And let's look at the first paragraph here. Marxist criticism is a type of criticism in which literary works are viewed as the product of work and whose practitioners emphasize the role of class and ideology as they reflect, propagate, and even challenge prevailing social order. Rather than viewing texts as repositories for hidden meanings, Marxist critics view texts as material products to be understood in broadly historical terms. In short, literary works are viewed as a product of work and hence of the realm of production and consumption we call economics. I'm going to fast forward to the last sentence of the second paragraph. Economics, they argue, provides the base or infrastructure of society from which a superstructure consisting of law, politics, philosophy, religion, and art emerges. Okay. If you think about money, money is really just a representation of power. That is all that money is. Money is a tangible thing that says you can have X amount of what you want. You can spend X amount of your time the way that you want to spend it. And the more money you have, the more choices you get to make for yourself. The less money you have, the fewer choices you get. Does that seem reasonable? You following me there? All right. So Marxist economics says that everything else in our society, the family unit, government, law, politics, religion, everything is built on the bedrock of who has power. And Marxist criticism is particularly good for writing about this time period, the medieval period, because so much was shifting in the determination of who was going to have power. Remember the Yersinia Pestis video we watched about the plague and about how the plague restructured economics in the Middle Ages because half of everyone died, and so the middle class broke out, feudalism dissolved. A lot of things are happening economically. So even though Marx was not around in the Middle Ages, you can still write Marxist criticism of the economic restructuring that was happening that you can see in the literature as we read it. I know that a lot of you have commented that there's overlap between economics, your economics class, and your British literature class. Yes?
And psychology.
And psychology, yes. It all comes together because economics is the foundation, according to Marx. Now, there are Marxist buzzwords that you can use if you want to write Marxist literature. And, I mean, not literature, but Marxist criticism. And if you were going to write a Marxist criticism of Goldilocks, you could easily say that Goldilocks is an allegory, and in that allegory, Goldilocks is the proletariat, that means the working class person, or, somebody who has no power, whose time is determined by the man, the capitalist man, and who only gets the few pennies that the man is willing to rain down upon him. And that in this story, Goldilocks is that working class proletariat who is justifiably rising up against the capitalist bears. Obviously, the bears are capitalists, these omnivore predators, fierce with their teeth and claws, incredibly strong against this weak little girl with no economic power. And she breaks into the capitalist house, man, and she takes what's hers. She takes a nap. She gets her rest. She gets food. She gets to sit down. And then the bears come back in and they run her out, man. Because the man always wins. That's economic criticism. And, would be fairly easy to do with the Partner's Tale, right? A story told by a thief who exploits the proletariat, who takes advantage of the fact that they are powerless in society with their illiteracy and their lack of exposure to ideas.
Sure.
And then profits from them. You could definitely do some strong Marxist criticism about a number of the stories in the Canterbury Tales. Now, yes, we have only read 3 of the Canterbury Tales together. We have read The Wife of Bath's Tale, The Partner's Tale, and The Knight's Tale. But there are 21 other tales that you could write about. And we're going to be watching the BBC series next week so you can get some ideas. But there are other stories that you can read and write about as well. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about what you might want to do. All right. So if Marxism does not appeal to you, then you could write traditional literary criticism. We'll come back to this